Johnny Carson was the king of late-night television. For 3 decades, he wasn't just a talk show host. He was America's barometer for what was funny, what was respectable, and which celebrities truly mattered. If Carson liked you, your career skyrocketed. If he didn't, well, people noticed. But every so often, Carson let something slip. A rare comment, a quiet observation that hinted at truths Hollywood worked very hard to hide. And when it came to Doris Day, the woman billed as America's sweetheart, Carson revealed something shocking. To millions, Doris Day was perfection. She was the smiling blonde in Technicolor musicals, the wholesome leading lady in romantic comedies, the woman whose voice could make wartime soldiers weep and post-war families feel safe. She represented purity, optimism, and everything Hollywood wanted America to believe in during the 1950s and 60s. But Johnny Carson knew there was another side. Behind the cheerful songs and the dazzling smile, Doris Day lived a life filled with betrayal, financial ruin, broken marriages, and crushing personal heartbreak. And Carson, who had built his reputation on charm and wit, couldn't ignore what was happening beneath her polished Hollywood image. So why did Carson hint that Doris Day's life wasn't what we thought it was? Why did he, of all people, reveal that behind America's sweetheart was a woman quietly carrying unimaginable burdens? By the time you finish this story, you'll understand what Johnny Carson saw in Doris Day, and why her life, as perfect as it looked on screen, tells a much darker truth about Hollywood itself. Stay with me, because the real Doris Day is far more complicated than the one Hollywood wanted you to believe.
Do what you want to do, John. They'll have you in bed, you know.
Doris Day's story begins far from the glitter of Hollywood. Born Doris Mary Ann Kappelhoff in Cincinnati, Ohio, in 1922, she didn't grow up dreaming of movie stardom. In fact, her first passion was dance. As a teenager, she trained seriously, hoping to build a career as a professional dancer. But a tragic car accident shattered that dream, leaving her with a badly injured leg. For many, that would have been the end of the story. But for Doris, it was just the beginning. While she recovered, she discovered something even more powerful than dancing: her voice. By the late 1930s, Doris was singing on local radio, and her warm, effortless style caught the attention of band leaders. Soon she was performing with big bands, her voice soaring over swing orchestras at a time when America desperately needed music to lift its spirits. Her breakout came in 1945 with the song "Sentimental Journey," recorded with Les Brown's band. That record wasn't just a hit. It became the unofficial anthem of soldiers returning home from World War II. Imagine young men stepping off trains, duffel bags slung over their shoulders, hearing Doris Day's voice welcoming them back to the lives they'd fought to protect. In that moment, Doris wasn't just a singer. She was a symbol of hope. Hollywood noticed. By the late 1940s, Doris was recruited into films, and she quickly became a sensation. Studios loved her wholesome image, blonde, smiling, with a voice that radiated warmth and sincerity. She was cast in romantic musicals and light comedies that perfectly matched the post-war mood. Families wanted stability, comfort, and optimism. And Doris Day delivered all of that in a single smile. But here's the part Carson couldn't ignore. While audiences saw a perfect sunny star, insiders knew how much pressure Doris carried. Being branded America's sweetheart wasn't just a compliment, it was a cage. Every move she made, every role she accepted, had to maintain that spotless image. And Carson, who made a career of studying people night after night from across his desk, seemed to sense that beneath her flawless exterior, Doris was already carrying private struggles that the public could barely imagine. By the 1950s and 60s, Doris was one of the most bankable stars in Hollywood. Films like Pillow Talk and Calamity Jane cemented her as the perfect mix of charm, humor, and musical talent. She was adored by millions. But Carson's knowing glances and rare comments hinted at what we now understand. The higher Doris climbed, the more fragile her private world became. On screen, Doris Day was radiant, the kind of woman whose laugh could light up an entire theater. But when the cameras stopped rolling, Her life was far more complicated, and every now and then, Johnny Carson let the audience glimpse that truth. Carson once remarked on The Tonight Show that Doris carried herself with a strength most people will never see. To viewers at home, it sounded like a casual compliment, but to insiders, that line carried weight. Carson had a knack for phrasing things carefully, never exposing more than he should. Yet that single comment revealed he knew Doris's personal life wasn't as picture-perfect as the role she played. The reality? Doris Day's private world was often filled with heartbreak. She married 4 times, and each marriage left scars. Her first husband, Al Jordan, was abusive and controlling, leaving Doris frightened and alone at a very young age. She was barely out of her teens when she realized that behind the image of happy newlywed, her life was unraveling. In 1968, Doris Day's world collapsed overnight. Her husband and manager, Martin Melcher, died suddenly of a heart attack. On the surface, it looked like another cruel twist of fate for Doris, who had already endured 2 failed marriages and years of personal struggle. But what she discovered after his death was even worse than the grief itself. Melcher, the man she had trusted with her finances and her career, had left her penniless. Decades of box office hits, record sales, and television royalties gone. Doris, one of the most successful stars in Hollywood history, was millions of dollars in debt. To make matters worse, she also discovered that Melcher had secretly signed her into a television series, The Doris Day Show, without her knowledge or approval. It was betrayal on every level: personal, financial, and professional. America's sweetheart, who had spent her career projecting joy and stability, had been left with nothing but obligations she never agreed to. Johnny Carson, who by then had seen the entertainment industry chew people up and spit them out, reportedly reacted with disbelief. He knew how tough Hollywood could be, but even he was shocked at the scale of Melcher's deception. Behind the scenes, Carson expressed sympathy, saying Doris had been forced into survival mode, and he wasn't wrong. Rather than walk away, Doris honored the contract and delivered 5 years of The Doris Day Show. What audiences didn't realize at the time was that she hadn't wanted to be there. Every smile, every scene, every cheerful moment was the work of a woman clawing her way out of financial devastation. Carson's quiet admiration during interviews came from knowing exactly how much strength it took to keep going when the entire world thought she had it all. Carson, who prided himself on financial independence and careful control of his career, seemed to hold Doris in a different light after this scandal broke. While he was often quick with a sarcastic remark for other stars, with Doris, he showed restraint. It was as if he understood that mocking her would have been cruel, because she wasn't just another celebrity caught up in a scandal. She was a woman who had been betrayed by the very person she trusted most, and it was in this moment, when the world learned that Doris Day had lost everything, that Carson's rare comments about her resilience began to make sense. He wasn't just flattering a guest, he was acknowledging a survivor. To America, Doris Day was the ultimate romantic heroine. On screen, she was the woman every man wanted to marry and every woman wanted to be. She radiated warmth, charm, and effortless optimism. Films like Pillow Talk painted her as the ideal partner: strong, witty, loyal, and forever hopeful about love. But when the cameras stopped rolling, Doris's real love life was a series of heartbreaks that bore little resemblance to the stories Hollywood sold. 4 marriages, 4 endings filled with betrayal, disillusionment, or pain. Her first husband, Al Jordan, was violent and abusive. He despised her career and controlled her every move, leaving Doris scarred emotionally at just 19 years old. Her second marriage to George Weidler crumbled almost instantly. He couldn't handle her growing fame and walked away. Her third marriage to Martin Melcher ended in devastation when she discovered his financial betrayals after his death. And her fourth husband, Barry Comden, left her claiming she loved her dogs more than him. For a woman celebrated as the perfect symbol of romance, Her personal reality was the exact opposite. And Johnny Carson, who was no stranger to his own turbulent relationships, understood the irony better than anyone. Carson had built his career teasing celebrities, exposing their flaws with quick wit and sharp humor. But with Doris, he didn't play that game. He avoided the cheap laughs about her failed marriages, the same way he avoided jokes about her financial losses. Instead, he focused on her resilience, her ability to keep smiling, keep working, and keep showing grace under immense pressure. Insiders say Carson admired how Doris carried herself despite everything. During one appearance, he looked at her and said, almost offhandedly, "You make it look so easy." Viewers at home thought he was talking about her talent, but those in the industry knew it was a deeper observation. Doris made survival look effortless. That was Carson's unspoken revelation. Behind every cheerful performance and every lighthearted role was a woman who had endured enough heartbreak to break most people. Yet somehow she never let the public see the cracks. To Carson, who valued authenticity and strength of character, Doris wasn't just another Hollywood guest. She was living proof that even America's sweetheart wasn't immune to pain, but also proof that dignity could survive even the harshest betrayals. Johnny Carson was surrounded by celebrities every night. Actors, musicians, comedians. He'd seen them all. Some were humble, others arrogant, and many were so wrapped up in their own image that they couldn't see past the applause. Carson had a keen radar for authenticity, and he rarely held back when he spotted phoniness. But when it came to Doris Day, his attitude shifted. Unlike stars who flaunted their wealth or bragged about their latest projects, Doris carried herself with a kind of modesty that Carson respected deeply. Despite being one of the highest-paid actresses of her era, she never acted superior. She wasn't flashy, she wasn't boastful. In fact, she was often reluctant to even talk about her own success. Carson himself was famously private about his fortune. Though he was one of the richest entertainers in television history, he lived with a quiet Midwestern sensibility, avoiding showy displays of wealth. In Doris, he saw something similar. A woman who had achieved immense fame and money, only to lose much of it, but who never let bitterness or arrogance define her. Behind the desk, Carson often contrasted Doris, subtly but unmistakably, with other stars of her generation. When he hosted actors who flaunted their lifestyles, Carson's wit would turn sharp, cutting their egos down to size. With Doris, however, his humor was gentler, more protective. She was treated less like a celebrity to be roasted and more like a guest to be honored. Some insiders believe Carson's respect for Doris came from the way she carried herself through betrayal. Most stars in her position would have collapsed under the weight of scandal, financial ruin, and heartbreak. But Doris showed grace under fire. She didn't lash out at Hollywood. She didn't make herself the victim. She simply kept working, kept smiling, and quietly rebuilt her life. To Carson, that represented true strength. It wasn't about the headlines or the money. It was about dignity. He once quipped to a colleague off camera, "Some stars come here to prove how big they are." Doris doesn't have to prove anything, and that's why Carson's rare comments about her carried so much weight. He wasn't just flattering her. He was acknowledging that Doris Day was different, that in an industry full of egos and excess, she embodied something Hollywood had nearly lost: class. By the early 1970s, Doris Day had every reason to disappear from Hollywood, and that's exactly what she did. After the Doris Day show ended in 1973, she quietly walked away from the industry that had made her a star, and in many ways, broken her heart. While most actors clung to fame for as long as possible, Doris retreated to Carmel by the Sea, a small, quiet town on the California coast. There, she traded red carpets for garden paths, studio lights for sunlight, and high-powered Hollywood meetings for something much simpler: a life on her own terms. To outsiders, this retreat seemed sudden, even mysterious. Rumors swirled about why Doris had cut herself off. Some whispered that she was too scarred by her financial betrayal and heartbreaks to ever trust Hollywood again. Others speculated that she was protecting herself after years of being forced into projects and roles she didn't want. A few even claimed she was hiding away from the press to preserve the flawless image America remembered. Johnny Carson, however, offered a very different perspective. During one of his interviews, he remarked that Doris was too good for the business. To Carson, who had witnessed firsthand how unforgiving and ruthless Hollywood could be, her retreat wasn't weakness, it was strength. She had survived the machine, endured its betrayals, and then had the courage to walk away before it consumed her completely. Carson's respect for that decision was clear. While some saw Doris's retreat as strange, Carson saw it as liberation. He knew what it was like to live under the constant glare of fame, and he understood the toll it could take. In Doris, he recognized someone who had chosen peace over applause, dignity over endless spotlight. Her retreat became part of her mystique. Fans missed her, but they also admired her independence. Doris Day wasn't clinging to the past. She wasn't begging for attention. Instead, she built a quiet life, surrounded by close friends, gardens, and animals, far removed from the chaos of the entertainment industry. And yet, her absence only made her story more fascinating. People couldn't stop asking, why did America's sweetheart leave Hollywood behind so completely? Carson, in his understated way, had already answered. Doris Day had given the industry everything she had, and when it gave nothing back but heartbreak, she chose herself instead. By the time Doris Day stepped away from the cameras, she had already achieved what most stars could only dream of: box office dominance, platinum records, and the title of America's sweetheart. But her legacy wasn't just built on the roles she played. It was built on how she endured everything Hollywood threw at her. Johnny Carson, who watched celebrities rise and fall for decades, understood that distinction. He knew that fame alone didn't define greatness. Character did. And when Carson spoke about Doris, he spoke with a kind of respect he rarely showed to other stars. He admired how she reinvented herself after her world collapsed. Left with nothing, Doris built a new life not around money or fame, but around purpose. She became one of the first major celebrities to dedicate herself fully to animal welfare. Founding the Doris Day Animal Foundation, she turned her influence into something lasting, helping to change how America viewed animal rights. In a business where most stars chased relevance, Doris quietly built a legacy of compassion. Carson recognized that this made her different. In his world of late-night television, most celebrities came on his show to promote something: a movie, an album, a tour. Doris didn't need to sell herself anymore. Her presence alone carried weight, and when she shifted her focus away from Hollywood, Carson noted that her work still resonated. Not because she was in front of the cameras, but because people trusted who she was at her core. Even in retirement, Doris remained one of the most beloved figures in entertainment. She didn't chase comebacks, didn't stage reinventions, didn't try to cling to youth like so many others. She lived her life authentically, and that authenticity, rare in Hollywood, became her greatest gift to her fans. Carson often said that true entertainers gave more than they took. By that measure, Doris Day was one of the greats. She gave joy through her films, comfort through her music, and hope through her activism. And unlike many stars who faded once the spotlight dimmed, Doris left behind a legacy rooted not in scandal or excess, but in resilience and grace. For Carson, that was the ultimate measure of a life well lived. He had seen stars who burned bright and then self-destructed. Doris was different. She endured, she adapted, and she gave back. And that, Carson believed, was what made her unforgettable. The story of Doris Day isn't just about one woman's rise and fall in Hollywood. It's about the hidden cost of fame, and Johnny Carson knew it. As the host who saw more stars up close than anyone else, Carson became a kind of cultural mirror, reflecting not just their talent, but their humanity, or sometimes their lack of it. When Carson spoke about Doris, even in his subtle, carefully chosen words, he revealed something bigger: that her life symbolized both the best and worst of Hollywood. She embodied the dream: beauty, talent, charm, success. But she also carried the scars of an industry that demanded everything and gave very little back. Carson once hinted that Doris represented a kind of strength most people never see. It was more than a compliment. It was an acknowledgement that beneath the dazzling smile was a survivor of betrayal, financial ruin, and heartbreak. Her story wasn't just glamorous. It was a warning about the price of keeping up a perfect image in a ruthless business. In many ways, Doris and Carson came from the same world, but responded to it differently. Carson protected himself with wit, distance, and a certain aloofness that kept people at arm's length. Doris, by contrast, protected herself with warmth, optimism, and the sunny image that audiences loved. Both methods worked, but Doris's choice came at a higher personal cost. And yet, what makes her legacy endure isn't just the joy of her films or the beauty of her songs. It's the resilience she showed when the cameras stopped rolling. Doris Day proved that even when everything is stripped away, the money, the marriages, the fame, what truly defines you is how you carry yourself. Carson, a man who rarely handed out unguarded praise, understood this. To him, Doris was more than a star. She was a reminder of what Hollywood used to be, a time when grace, dignity, and quiet strength mattered as much as box office numbers. Today, when we look back at Doris Day's story through Carson's lens, we see more than just America's sweetheart. We see a woman who bore the weight of perfection while fighting battles no one knew about. And that's why her story still matters. Because Doris Day wasn't just a movie star. She was proof that even the brightest lights can cast the darkest shadows. And that sometimes, the smiles that shine the brightest are the ones hiding the deepest pain. When Johnny Carson spoke about Doris Day, he wasn't just talking about another Hollywood guest. He was revealing, in his own quiet way, that the woman America adored wasn't living the perfect fairy tale everyone believed. Doris Day had given the world laughter, music, and joy. But behind her, sunshine was a lifetime of betrayal, loss, and survival. Carson knew the difference between a celebrity and a legend. A celebrity is remembered for the spotlight. A legend is remembered for what they endure when it fades. And in Doris Day, he saw a legend. Not because of her flawless image, but because of the pain she endured without letting the world see her break. Her story reminds us that Hollywood's brightest smiles often hide the deepest scars. She was the golden girl of her time, yet she faced battles most of her fans never knew about. And that, perhaps, is why Carson respected her so much. She wasn't just America's sweetheart. She was proof that survival itself can be a legacy. So now the question is yours. When you think of Doris Day, do you remember the flawless star Hollywood wanted you to see? Or the resilient woman Carson quietly revealed to us, the survivor who kept smiling through it all? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Let me know which side of Doris's legacy resonates with you most. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories that peel back Hollywood's glamorous surface to reveal the truth underneath. Because sometimes, as Johnny Carson showed us, the real story is hidden in plain sight.